The question I want to ask this morning is, what does it take for us to finish our race when it's raining out there? When we're in the middle of a storm. We're still looking at this Apostle Paul, who's got this uncanny ability to keep running his race in the center of God's will while his life and world is falling apart all around him. And I want to give you, there's three that we don't even have the time to delve into all that's here. We're going to do a little bit of a frog hop over a couple of the verses just to try to stay on track. But there are three lessons we can learn from the last portion of what we read that can help you and help me finish our race in the storm. Write this down. Number one, we can learn from Paul that we can overcome, we can finish our race in the storm when we reveal our resolve. Write that down. When we reveal our resolve. Basically, how bad do we want it? And I want you to look at verse 30 through 32. In an attempt to escape from the ship, the sailors let down the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending they were lowering some anchors from the bow. Then Paul, the man of God, said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved." So the soldiers cut the ropes. Did you get that? The soldiers what? They cut the ropes that held the lifeboat and let it fall away. In other words, basically, they eliminated the option. They're casting their lot with the ship. They're going all the way. They're cutting the ropes. I'm telling you, we've talked oftentimes that when storms come, that maybe God doesn't cause the storm, but He can use the storm for our purpose. I'm going to tell you the opposite is also true. The opposite of that is also true. There are storms that can come in our lives in this unfair, crazy world that Satan doesn't cause, but he'll try to use it. Now, guys, you can take this to the bank. When it's storming and the lightning is running across the sky and the thunderclaps are just deafening, you can count on one thing. The enemy's going to be there with a shortcut, a compromise, an easy way out. And if you take it, you're going down. When those soldiers cut the ropes, they show this element of resolve. We are going all the way, no shortcuts. We're going to run through the tape. One of the events that I didn't see this event. It was Glenn who saw this event. He was in his man cave, I think, and he was watching the Olympics. I can't even remember. Do you remember what race it was? Was it 200 meters? One of the 200-meter final, not finals, but to qualify for the finals. And an American was in the lead. He was going to win the race. Have you ever seen these guys like Bolt and all these other guys? They're out there. They're about to cross the tape. What do? They kind of coast. I don't even need my best to beat you. Basically kind of thing. And this one American trying to qualify for this race that he has spent 4 years training for. And he gets close to the end and he coasts. Guess what happens? 2 guys pass him. The first 2 automatically go to the next level, but after that, it's all based on your time. And evidently, it must have been a little bit of a slower heat because his time wasn't good enough, and he was almost ready to win, almost automatically go to the finals, get to run against Usain Bolt and all the other boys, and he loses that race, and he gets disqualified. He doesn't even make it into the finals. I heard Glenn screamed and yelled for 2 hours after that. You never coast. You never coast. You run through the finish line. If you're going to finish the race in the middle of the storm, you've got to display your resolve. I was reading about a restaurant owner that was taking some meat into his freezer late at night so they could be ready for the next day's breakfast, and he interrupted a break-in his own restaurant. And before you know it, there's some guns go off and some bullets are flying, and he takes a couple of bullets. He's laying on the ground. They go running off. Next thing he hears is some ambulance and some police, and they rush him to the hospital, and it's a little bit nip and tuck whether or not he's going to make it. They rush him into the ER. They're ripping his clothes off so they can get to the wounds. And they're about ready to plunge the syringes in his arms, and he's looking into the eyes of these nurses and these doctors, and they're all frowning and they're all pessimistic, and he knows that if he doesn't do something fast, they already got him dead. They already got him dead. And they're about ready to put him under, and some nurse yells out and says, "Are you allergic? Are you allergic to anything?" And he yells, he jumps, this is his moment, he yells back, and he says, "Yes!" And they all stop. They all freeze, even the doctors, And she says, "What are you allergic to?" And with all of his strength, he musters and he yells out one word, and he screams in that ER, he screams, "Bullets! I'm allergic to bullets!" And they all did what you did. They all laughed, And suddenly the whole mood changed. There's a little twinkle in their eyes. Somebody shows that kind of courage, that kind of resolve, deserves to get saved. There's some people in this room. It's been a long time in the storm. The enemy's come around with a shortcut. He's come around with a way to coast. Some might be in this room even contemplating quitting. Roy Benovitz. I read about him years ago, and I just pulled out, just before this morning, I pulled out this little excerpt. He was a sergeant in Vietnam. He wasn't even supposed to go on that ride that day. But he was close enough to the helicopter to hear this crackle, and he could hear the popping of the guns, and a 12-man Special Forces unit was trapped out there in the bush somewhere. And this helicopter crew was being called to go right into that firefight, try to pull those guys out. He knew some of those guys. So he volunteered. It's probably why he got the Medal of Honor. He ran into the helicopter. He didn't have to. It wasn't his turn, but he knew those guys. And when he flew in, this 12-man security force were completely surrounded. Some of the enemy were less than 25 yards away. When he hit the ground running. Before he reached the men, he was shot in the leg. That was the first of 4 wounds. When he got there was a grenade that exploded in front of him. It miraculously missed his eyes, but went into various parts of his face. The men, when he got there, they were all shot up. There wasn't a one that wasn't wounded more than once. A few of them were already dead. And he yelled at them to let's go. And nobody wanted to move because it hurt to move. And about that time, oh, wow, that was great. Am I going to make it? Thank you for that thumbs up. Aren't you the guy that just did the video up there? He gets a rifle butt in the back of his head. They're charging. He turns around. He plunges a knife into that guy. And he turns and he yells at the remaining men. I will never forget what he says. He says to these men who don't want to move, they're so scared they don't want to get out of that little hole they're in. And he yells at them and he says, You don't have permission to stay here. You don't have permission to die. Pray and move out. You don't have permission to stay here. You don't have permission to die. Pray and move out. He got them moving. He got two men, weaker men. He carried them. While he was carrying them, he got another shot in the back. He falls into the chopper. He's credited with saving 8 of the 12 men. They fly him back. Now he's been shot 4 times. They put him into the, man, I just love this, Mike. It's just blessing my heart today. They put him into the triage, whatever you call it, and the doctor came, took one look at him and says, he's too far gone. Set him off to the side. You know what he did? He spit in that doctor's face. There's a little bit of resolve there, wouldn't you say? They saved that guy's bacon, and Reagan gave him a Medal of Honor. Where's the other mic? Thank you, Glenn. Lord, thank you for this wonderful microphone that's driving me crazy. Are we good? Listen to me. Somebody in this room is contemplating quitting. I am here to tell you, you have been bought with the blood of Jesus Christ. Your life is not yours. Do you hear me? You do not belong to yourself. You have been bought with a price. And you do not have permission to quit. You do not have permission to die. Now get out of the hole you're in and move on. If you're going to finish the race, you're going to have a little bit of resolve, a little bit of sand in your gut. Are you with me? You don't have permission to stay here. You don't have permission to die. Number 2, write this down. If you're going to finish your race in the storm, number 2, we learn from Paul, you have to replenish your reserves. You have to replenish your reserves. Look at verse 33. Just before dawn, isn't that something? Just before the sun came up, Paul urged them all to eat. For the last 14 days, he said, you have been in constant suspense and have gone without food. You haven't eaten anything. Now I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive. Not one of you will lose a single hair of his head. After he said this, he took some bread and gave thanks to God in front of them all. He then broke it and began to eat. They were all what? One more time. They were all what? And they ate some of the food themselves. What's Paul doing? He's replenishing their strength. He's renewing their strength. Read my lips. There are some of you people, you need to renew your strength. Life consists of more than work. And I want to tell somebody in this room, life consists of more than the storm you're in. You just only see the storm because you're so focused on it. But there are some areas of your life it's not raining. It's not all storm. It's not all work. Some of you have so many irons in the fire, you've put out the fire. You burn candle at both ends, you're not as bright as you think you are. God did not put you on this earth to work. He put you on this earth to be His child. And some of you need to stop and replenish your strength. Do you know why some of you haven't gotten out of your storm? All of us, preachers included. The one thing that we have forgotten in our Christian culture, not even the culture out there, in the culture in here, do you know what's something we've forgotten? The whole biblical concept of Sabbath. Do you even know what Sabbath is? Do you know some of you in this room, I won't see you again until October. The average attendance to church today in the Christian church is about once a month. The Bible says, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together. Keep the Sabbath day holy. I love what John Jones said. Where's John Jones? You sit right over here. He's somewhere. John, are you out in the cafe? I caught you. What's that? Well, tell him to get his rear end in here. John Jones had a saying, and it's a little risky, but I'll risk it. You know, he was a used car salesman for many years till this year. And his famous saying that just caused me to belly laugh was he used to say, there's a butt for every seat. You know, car, there's a butt for every seat. Well, I'm here to tell you there's a seat for every butt. Get yours in here. Get your rear end in here. You need to be in here every Sunday. Keep the Sabbath day holy. And here's the other thing, guys. Here's the other thing. You have fallen into the trap of thinking just coming to church is it. There's more to Sabbath than that. There's a resting. There is a replenishing. There is a renewing of your strength. Some of you are not getting out of your storm because you're not renewing your strength. You know, when I was a kid, right up to just a few years ago, it was the typical Christian commitment was Wednesday night church, prayer meeting, Sunday morning, Sunday school and church, and Sunday night church. So 3 times a week, you come, you put your butt in the seat, and you take in. You do it on Wednesday night. Then you come back, do it again on Sunday morning. Then you come back and do it again on Sunday night. And that was it. A few years back, we decided to turn Wednesday night into a ministry night. Oh, think of that. And then we decided that we would do life groups. We started life groups on Sunday night. So many people went to life groups, we didn't have anybody left for Sunday mornings. Sunday night church. So we decided just to let everybody be in a life group. Man, I had such guilt over that. I would come back Sunday night for the last 40 years. I feel like I was sinning. Don't feel like I'm sinning anymore. You know what? That helped Kath and I to rediscover Sabbath in our life. Kathy helps me with this. I need a little help in this department. But on Sunday afternoons after this service is over, she and I are going to just take off. Maybe we'll go eat with some of you guys, but after that, man, it's just Kath and I. I've told you a couple of times we go to Carbons Cove, just sit under a tree and watch the waves come up. A couple of times we'll just go for a drive. Sometimes we'll get a back rub. We'll just chill out. John, where have you been? See, there's a butt for that seat. My best moment of the week has become Sunday afternoons. I shut everything down. Turn the phone off and just get away with Kath and Jesus. Some of you have too many irons in the fire. You're not honoring your Sabbath, and it's part of your problem. You know, every year, 25 of the largest churches in the Southern Baptist movement, their pastors get together and they retreat once a year, each other, and they feed off each other and they pour into each other. And one guy that, this is going back a ways, Adrian Rogers, he's in heaven now. Bellevue Baptist Church, Memphis, Tennessee. Ed Young, Second Baptist, Houston, Texas. Charles Stanley, First Baptist, Atlanta, Georgia. And several others, big name guys, giants in the faith, would steal together a retreat and they would feed off of each other. And I remember the reason I know it because I was reading part of Rick Warren's biography, and he talked about the first time, Saddleback, California. And he was invited as a 33-year-old kid to this retreat, this time of refilling. And the very first session, he's kind of nervous and never done this before. All his heroes are around him. And Adrian Rogers turned to him and says, Rick, stand up and tell us what you're doing at Saddleback, because he was already busting. He was running about, 7, 8, 9,000 at that time, and they'd already planted a couple churches that were running 4,000. And so he gets up and he starts to share. And as in the middle of his sharing, he looks over to the right, and all of a sudden, for the first time, he spots W.A. Criswell, pastor of First Baptist Dallas, the largest church in the world for the last 50 years. He's 80 years old. He's published 59 books, most of them bestsellers. And you know what he's doing? Do you know what he's doing? He's got his learner's lean, he's got his pen and paper, and he's taking every word down that this rookie Baptist preacher is saying to him. He's taking notes on Rick Warren's lecture. He was so humbled by it that after the session was done, he ran back to his room, fell on his knees, and cried like a baby. He said, Lord, I want to be like him. I want to be like him. I want to keep learning and stretching and replenishing when I'm 80 years old. I still want to be after it. I want to be on the cutting edge. And then it dawned on him. The reason why this 80-year-old old-timer is still in the game is because he's honoring Sabbath. And he's retreating and he's replenishing himself. And if the spiritual giants of our Christian culture need it, and if God himself did it, now what is your excuse? I missed that. Why aren't you honoring your Sabbath? What reason good enough do you have? Get your butt in the seat. Aren't you glad you came to church today? Hear your pastor say, but. It all started with him, right over there. It's his fault. Number 3. If you're going to finish your race in the storm, you got to release your refuse. R-E-F-U-S-E. Did I say that right? You have to release your refuse. You have to release your excess stuff. And I want you to look at verse 38. When they had eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the what? By throwing the grain into the sea. Is grain sinful? Is there something sinful about grain? No. In fact, it's extremely valuable. It's a very valuable commodity. It's why the owner of the ship's taken the journey. But that stuff's getting thrown overboard. Even though it's not sinful, in fact, it's a good thing. But it's excess stuff that is hindering them from getting through their storm. So the question is, what kind of stuff do you have? It might not even be sinful stuff. But it's not the main thing. And it's hindering you from running your best race. What are you carrying that needs to go over the side? Guys, listen to your pastor. If you don't get anything else, I want you to get this. People who finish their race in the storm, they travel light. They're careful what they pick up. Could it be there's something you're carrying in your race right now you should have never picked up? Can I suggest a few things? Some debt. I am convinced that financial debt is hindering many of our people from running their best race. Can I suggest some false guilt? There is some false guilt in this room. I know, because I know most of you. There is some false guilt in this room for people. Something happened back there, and the devil's giving you a heyday on it, and he's giving you some junk you're carrying in your race, and it's not even real. The Lord's not even convicting you. It's all of the enemy. And you're carrying it, and it's hindering your race. some bad attitudes. Ouch. I felt that all the way up here. You know, we just had our staff retreat, and I want to be really careful because I didn't ask permission to do this. And I want whatever shared in staff retreat to remain, confidential, but I don't think this will be a problem. But I want to share something Jordan said. She's on vacation with Alex. Alex is our youth pastor. Jordan's just starting a counseling ministry and a young adult ministry, but she's always been very active with Alex in her husband's ministry with our youth. And she said something about you guys that I don't think I'll forget. She's very, very close to our young ladies in the youth group. I think she's having one of the best ministries I ever saw of a pastor's wife, a youth pastor's wife with the girls. I mean, she is gold. And something that she said that I won't soon forget, she said she loves the summer with the girls in the youth group because the Wednesday nights are so good and the fellowship is so good. Everybody's there that is there, wants to be there, and there's a good attitude, there's a good spirit, there's a twinkle in their eye. They're fun to be around. But the part gets a little dicey. She's almost sorry to see school start. Do you know why? Because they start running around with other kids. Different crowd. And invariably, they pick up some wrong spirits, some wrong attitudes, and the twinkle goes out of their eye, and they're not as fun to be around anymore. What's true with kids is true with us. It's so easy to pick up a negative spirit. It's so easy to carry something you should have never picked up in the first place. Sometimes it's just, it's a job you should have said no to. You didn't say no, you picked it up, and now it's killing you. You don't have enough time to cover everything. You should have never picked it up. You should have never picked it up. It's stuff. Some of it's not even sinful. Some of it's kind of valuable. But it's hindering you from your best race. When they've actually seen this, where an eagle will come down and land on a weasel and take its talons and dig it deep into that weasel's back and body, lift him right off the ground. And they've seen it. They've seen it happen. In midair, all of a sudden, that eagle will go limp and go crashing to the earth. You know why? Because that weasel turned around and buried his fangs right into its heart. Killed it in midair. Because it wasn't careful what it picked up. An attitude can do that to you. It can kill your spirit. Do you know there's a snail? They call it the butterfly of the sea. It's the nudibranch snail. Doesn't even have a shell, but it's a bright, bright color. It's the most bright colored thing in the ocean. And the jellyfish they see it and they think it's lunch. And they go in and the thing that this snail wants is for that jellyfish to wrap its tentacles around it and pull it in and eat it. Because there's something of an enzyme that keeps the digestion tract of the jellyfish from devouring the snail. And the snail will attach itself to the inside of that jellyfish. And guess who gets eaten? Jellyfish. Ends up laying on the floor of the ocean dead as a doornail while that snail has his supper. I know, it's kind of gross. Anybody want to go to McDonald's after this? You got to be careful what you pick up. What have you picked up that is robbing you of your best race? Remember the gal and the guy, the guy's name's Charlie. He's struggling with some stress, and they go to the doctor. He's having a little bit of chest pain, worried a little bit about stroking out. And so they go to the doctor. They run all these tests. And Tests come back. The doctor's kind of concerned, but he doesn't want to talk to Charlie. He wants to talk to his wife. And says, I just wanted to talk with you because, to be honest, Charlie's in bad shape. We could lose Charlie. But I think I can save him, but I need your help. And if you remember the account, the doctor's telling her how she can help. She gets out a piece of paper and everything. I mean, she's writing it all down. And he says, first thing you got to do, now listen to this, gals, because this is not your world anymore. He says, make breakfast for him every morning. Make lunch. Make supper. No fast food. You got to help me guard what he's eating. And then she says, no honeydew lists. No do this or do that because it causes stress. Now, if he wants to do something, he can, but it's got to be his choice. And try to stay positive. Don't nag. Don't dump on him. Don't bring your problems to him because that causes stress. And she's writing this all down. And then he says, and anytime he wants to make love, make love. Because there's nothing like sex to help alleviate stress. So anytime he wants to make love with him. She's writing it all down. And then, they walk out together into the waiting room, and Charlie says, how'd it go? And she doesn't say much. And they get in the car, and they're driving home. And said, how'd it go? What the doctor saying? Doesn't say much. And finally, at the stoplight, she reaches over, pats his hand, and says, Charlie, you're going to die. There's a gal that's lightening her load. And the load is Charlie. Some of you need to lighten your load. Hopefully it won't be Charlie or your spouse. I just finished up a great staff retreat with the staff. And we were talking about defining moments. And I believe that we are, as a church, we're in a defining moment. We've had some really neat things are happening. I'm not going to turn this into a staff retreat, but there's some really neat things that are exciting me. And I identified some of the defining moments that we've experienced this past year as a church. But then I asked them to identify some defining moments, not as a church, but in your family. And I had to think about it. I knew where I was going, so there was a little bit of a break between the staff retreat during the day and this big, nice meal we were having that night. There was about an hour and a half. And so I got alone, and I thought, okay, what was a defining moment this past year in my family? And I thought about the girls, because to be honest with you, most of you know my girls are my life. Stephanie, Lindsay, and Lisha, they just absolutely own me to this day. Kath is my best friend. I love you more every passing year. But that wasn't where my defining moment was this year. My defining moment came a few months ago when Kath and I took a 9-hour trip back home. It takes 9 hours to get back to Marion, Indiana. We're only going to be there for 2 days, and then we've got to make 9 hours back. I don't make that kind of trip for too many people, but I made it for Kathy's mother, who was celebrating her 99th birthday. We didn't want to wait for 100 because you never know. And she's still sharp as a tack. She's as sharp as anybody in this room mentally. Health is good. We just lost Dad Fisher about a year ago. She's lived by herself. She's doing great. And all of Kathy's siblings were there. We came in from all over the country. Minnesota, New York, Kentucky, Virginia. They were all there, about 5 of them, and even some grandkids. And we were in a big circle, and man, we were all visiting and sharing. And Mom Fisher's this old holiness preacher's wife. If you want to talk about a gal who doesn't take shortcuts, never took a shortcut in her life, she is running through the finish line. I hope I finish as good as Mom Fisher's finishing. And as far as intimacy with God and finding quiet time and honoring Sabbath, that is her middle name. And as far as lightening her load, my mother-in-law has never had much of anything in her life. She travels light all the way. And everybody brought gifts, and we brought gifts. In fact, Kathy brought a gift. Guys, you know how it is. You know, they buy it and you get some of the credit for it. But can't even remember what we bought her, but we got her something nice, I'm sure. And everybody else did. They were unwrapping the presents. And while they were doing that, the Lord just kind of whispered in my ear, and He said, I want you to give her as a present that Irish blessing that I shared with you about a month and a half ago. Some of you were there. I shared it with the staff over the weekend. And the Lord whispered and said, I want you to give that Irish blessing to her as her birthday present from you. And so, you know, while they're going around the circle, I'm trying to make sure I got it in my head. I'm trying to rehearse it. And this was a little unusual for me. I usually kind of stay quiet when the Fishers are together because they use up all the air. There's not a lot of air when they're going around. And finally, you know, there was a little bit of a lull in the conversation, and the room was packed. And I spoke up. And I said, Mom, I want to give you a present, but it's not like these presents. I want to give you this Irish blessing. Most of you have heard me share it. And it got quiet, which is very unusual in the Fisher house. And I began to unwrap it. And she was hanging on every word. And before I was done, she began to weep. It's the first time I ever saw Mom Fisher cry. She was always in control. And it just took my breath a little. And Lord helped me to get through it. And, you know, it was a great moment. And we kind of went on to our visit. And about a half hour later, she just, in the conversation of all that was going on, she turned to me and she said, do it again. Oh, man. John, do it again. I want to hear it again. And so I went through it, you know, a second time. It was a defining moment. I will never, ever forget it the rest of my days. Because I believe that there are some here that are running in the storm. You've taken a hit, just like up there on the screen. The enemy's coming and he's offering shortcuts. He's offering compromises. He's encouraging coasting. Because I believe that there are some that have too many irons in the fire. You're putting the fire out. You're not taking time to allow the Lord to replenish your spirit. You're not honoring Sabbath. Because I believe there are some that are carrying too much stuff in your race. You're carrying some stuff He does not want you to carry. I believe that there are some here that have picked up something and carried something you should have never picked up to begin with. To you, whoever you are, I want to say it again. I want to say it again. May the wrinkles in your face be a testimony that you laughed. May the hair gray upon your head be a testimony that you loved and cared. May the soreness in your back and bones be a testimony that you lifted. And may the scars on your heart be a testimony that you lived. May the road always rise up to meet you. May the wind always be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rain fall gently on your fields. May you walk frequently and intimately with your God in the garden in the cool of the day. And until you cross the river, may He hold you safely in the palm of His hand. You're the best there is. Go get 'em.